Dubro Suspicion Files.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are undertaking a deep forensic examination, not just into a single crime, but into the structural origins of corruption that really paralyzed the South Korean justice system for a decade.
It's a huge topic.
It is, and for many of you listening, the name Burning Sun probably conjures up these really vivid, chaotic images.
Oh, absolutely. K-pop, luxury nightclubs, high-level drugs.
And that shocking systemic police collusion that just exploded into a global crisis back in 2019.
And that collective shock, while it was completely appropriate, it also kind of obscured a darker truth.
Which is?
Burning Sun was not some unforeseen tragedy. It was a predictable, large-scale consequence of lessons that were successfully learned years earlier.
So this wasn't something new?
Not at all. The institutional rot didn't just spontaneously generate in a Gangnam nightclub. It metastasized. It grew from an earlier and, much more importantly, an unpunished crime.
Exactly. And our sources today, they compel us to rewind the clock nearly a decade. We are diving into the grim, chilling prequel to all of this.
The unresolved 2010 death of Detective Lee Young-jun in the provincial city of Yeosu.
Our mission today is pretty specific. We're analyzing how the successful cover-up of Detective Lee's death established this perfect, proven blueprint for impunity.
A model, yeah. A model that the later, more sophisticated cartel successfully adopted and expanded. We're really dissecting the foundational mechanics of institutional self-protection.
And the initial shock factor here, it really can't be overstated. Detective Lee, a dedicated 30-year-old officer, was found deceased in a reservoir.
Right. And he wasn't just on vacation. He was actively investigating a prostitution and bribery ring.
At the center of which was a man named Mr. Kim, the proprietor, and he was operating with protection that was purchased
from the very local police force that Lee belonged to.
His own colleagues.
That is the core tragedy we have to confront here. Detective Lee wasn't eliminated by some independent criminals. The mortal danger he faced came directly from his own command structure.
From the inside.
From the inside. This is a deep dive into the Brotherhood of Silence, the systemic operational flaws, and the series of forensic impossibilities that were required to declare what was clearly a murder, a suicide. We're looking at how the state deployed its own resources to protect corruption.
Okay, so let's unpack the environment that really incubated this corruption. We have to start in Yeosu, 2010.
Right.
And you can't just visualize this as some quiet, remote fishing town. That's not what it was.
Not at all. Yeosu was in the middle of a really intense modernization drive. They were preparing to host the 2012 World Expo.
So they were trying to project an image of global sophistication, of economic vibrancy.
And that veneer of modernization, it provided the perfect cover for a deeply entrenched shadow economy.
An economy which, our sources describe, was rigidly centralized around the room salon culture.
Yes, and these are crucial social and economic nodes in South Korea. We have to understand that.
So explain that. What makes the room salons so critical to this specific type of vice economy? I mean, they're not just regular bars, are they?
Not even close. They're high-end, exclusive establishments, hostess bars, but their tree function is multifaceted.
Yeah.
The documents we have describe them explicitly as the informal boardrooms of the shadow economy.
Wow.
This is where illicit business deals, often involving political favors, real estate, major infrastructure contracts. This is where they're brokered.
And the sexual servicing.
They're inextricably linked to these transactions. So it makes these places hubs of financial and political power, not just, simple entertainment.
And the proprietor at the center of this, Mr. Kim, he recognized that this political power was way more effective than just brute force.
That's what elevated him. He wasn't just another criminal, he was untouchable. He didn't fear raids or investigations because he owned the investigators.
Oh.
He maintained a meticulous handwritten bribery list, a physical ledger.
A physical book.
A physical book. And it documented monthly, regular payments, often categorized by an officer's rank or their department.
So he was paying for protection from the police.
From the police, local government agencies, and this is crucial elements within the local prosecutor's office.
So he was essentially paying a subscription fee to transform the local police precinct into his own private security detail for the sex trade.
Precisely. And this established the structural foundations for the future cartel. We can draw these immediate sharp parallels between this analog system and the digital one that emerged nearly a decade later.
Let's analyze that structural comparison right now because it really shows how the whole mechanism just scaled up over time.
Okay, so if we break down the analysis, the corruption hub in 2010 was the Room Salon, right? Centered on the sex trade.
Right.
By 2019, that hub was the 𝐏𝐻𝐃𝐂𝐀𝐒𝐓 nightclub, diversifying into drugs, sophisticated trafficking, money laundering. But the central difference is the record.
The ledger.
Mr. Kim's critical piece of evidence was that physical, handwritten ledger, a huge risk, but an essential document for him.
And in the digital age?
That ledger evolved. It became encrypted digital chat logs, specifically on platforms like 𝐏𝐻𝐃𝐂𝐀𝐒𝐓, and records inside cryptocurrency wallets used for illicit payments.
So cash envelopes.
Replaced by untraceable crypto transactions, investment equity, high-value perks like permanent golf memberships, concert tickets.
But the goal was identical.
Yeah. By state protection. The technology just got more efficient at preserving anonymity.
That shift from a physical book to an encrypted chat, that's the key evolution. It shows the cartel was adapting to forensic challenges.
It does.
But let's go back to the human element in Yosu. Detective Lee Young-jun. Why was he the fatal weakness in Mr. Kim's whole structure?
Lee was an anomaly. He was an outsider, and he was a true believer in his duty.
Okay, what do you mean by an outsider?
Well, in provincial cities like Yosu, local ties, was known as 𝐏𝐻𝐃, are absolutely critical for your career, for social stability. Lee transferred from the 𝐏𝐻𝐃 police station in Seoul.
Which is the nation's premier policing hub.
Right, because of the sheer concentration of wealth and high-level crime there.
So transferring from 𝐏𝐻𝐃 to Yosu means he lacked that essential social debt, the 𝐏𝐻𝐃. He wasn't tied into the local network of favors and silent complicity.
Exactly. He arrived unencumbered by local loyalty. He was also an intensive workaholic, often sleeping at the station.
So his dedication was purely to the job description.
Not to socializing with the local power brokers or participating in those room salon initiation rites we can talk about later.
And his assignment was crucial. He was put in the intelligence division.
That placement gave him direct access. He wasn't just on street patrol. He was processing sensitive, high-level corruption data, internal intelligence reports.
And his training from Seoul?
His methodological training from Seoul gave him the ability to connect the dots in the sensitive files he was reading. You have an isolated, high-level outsider with access to the system's most vulnerable points. He was a catastrophic failure waiting to happen for that local corruption structure.
So Detective Lee is now inside this system. He's highly skilled, he's aware of the rot, and he finds his opening in mid-2010. He gets assigned to a general crackdown on illegal sex trafficking, but he refuses to follow the unspoken rule, which is to look the other way when it comes to Mr. Kim's operation.
That's the critical pivot. He realized shutting down the small-time operations wouldn't change anything. He had to target the system that granted immunity.
So Lee's success hinged on securing concrete evidence of that protective infrastructure, not just the vice itself.
Exactly. And that leads him to the critical evidence. The bribery ledger.
The smoking gun.
The smoking gun. Our sources claim it implicated the police command and the local prosecutor's office.
And once that ledger was confirmed to exist and Lee was getting close to it, the situation immediately became what investigators called a zero-sum choice.
It was. Lee's success would have necessitated a massive internal affairs probe, potentially collapsing the entire Yosu police command structure.
And leading to criminal charges for high-ranking officials.
And the inverse, of course, is that silencing Lee meant the network survived. The lucrative protection racket continued.
The danger shifts instantly. It becomes entirely internal. Lee's life is now at risk not because of the room salon owner, but because of the immense bureaucratic self-preservation instinct of his own colleagues.
And the documents show Lee understood this implicitly. We have confirmation of a critical, protocol-shattering action he took on July 29, 2010.
Just hours before he disappeared.
Just hours. He attempted to contact the Busan Regional Police Agency.
Wait, Busan is a major city, but it's pretty far away. Why would he bypass the Jeonnam Provincial Agency, which was his immediate superior, to contact an entirely different regional force?
Because he recognized the corruption was pervasive up the chain of command within his own prudential jurisdiction.
He didn't trust them.
He didn't trust anyone. This action, jumping the chain, is the clearest possible signal of his total loss of faith and the gravity of the threat he felt. He needed an external, powerful agency to take custodianship of that ledger.
So if the corruption went all the way to the provincial level, that call to Busan was a desperate high-stakes move.
It was an act of survival.
He was essentially activating a regional rivalry to try and secure his own safety and the evidence.
And to solidify this narrative, we have some really chilling witness testimony.
Okay.
An anonymous colleague later reported that Lee received a highly threatening phone call on the morning of July 29. The details of that call are still sealed, but the effect was immediate and dramatic.
He told this colleague that he might be in trouble.
And that he had touched something he shouldn't have.
That psychological profile, urgency, fear, recognition of immediate, possibly fatal danger, that's just fundamentally incompatible with the narrative the police later manufactured.
Completely. The story of a quiet, depressed officer succumbing to financial stress. It doesn't line up at all.
Lee was not contemplating suicide. He was actively managing an existential threat. This sequence proves the timeline of peril was compressed into those final, terrifying hours.
The 24 hours between that threatening call and the discovery of his body are essential to dissect. This is where the corrupt elements took control of the narrative. They created a deliberate trail of staged confusion.
This period is the cartel's operational window.
Right. And on the afternoon of July 29, the first confusing data point is the traffic accident. Lee's car collided with a guardrail.
The official investigation used this to suggest he was erratic, maybe suicidal.
But forensic reconstruction hints this was more calculated. Perhaps a deliberate, low-impact forced interception. Or a clear warning signal.
Lee then goes to a nearby hospital for minor injuries, and this stop provides the most compelling evidence contradicting that suicide narrative.
It really does. The hospital CCTV footage is critical. It shows him pacing, nervous, checking his phone constantly. He looks like a man anticipating danger, not planning self-harm.
But the definitive proof of his future orientation, as the sources call it, is a really mundane administrative action.
He called his insurance company.
About the guardrail accident. A man planning to end his life in a few hours does not worry about the claims process for minor vehicular damage.
It's irrefutable evidence of a forward-looking mindset. Investigators later confirmed he was discussing his deductible and the paperwork he needed to file.
It shows an intent to live, to manage future obligations.
Exactly. Yet, shortly after he leaves that hospital, the timeline just violently breaks down.
He drove toward the Bolson Bridge area, and his cell phone signal vanishes. This is the operational void.
And that void, that crucial period between the evening of July 29 and the morning of July 30, is precisely where independent investigators believe the murder and the staging occurred.
What should have bridged that void was data, but this is where we see the systemic data blackout.
The crucial cell phone tracking data, the triangulation that could have pinpointed his movements, identified who he met, it was later claimed by the Jonam Provincial Agency to be unavailable.
This unavailable data due to technical glitches. This is a recurring motif in these high-level police misconduct cases, isn't it?
It's the signature of obstruction. It just defies statistical probability that the system suddenly goes blind only when a high-ranking corruption investigation is imminent.
So what's the prevailing theory?
The theory is that corrupt officers who still had access to his systems through the intelligence division provided his location to the enforcers working for the Room Salon network.
Facilitating the interception.
And then they neutralized him in that data void.
Let's just elaborate on why that loss of cell data is so damning. In 2010, cell tower data was standard procedure. Who would have been responsible for retrieving that specific location history?
The local police investigation team. The very team charged with looking into his death would have been the first to request it.
So the claim that the data was lost.
It's often cover for preemptive deletion or just a deliberate failure to submit the request to the telecommunications provider in the required time frame. It ensured that the single most important piece of temporal evidence was neutralized immediately.
So when Detective Lee's body was found in the reservoir on July 30, the reaction from the Yosu police was not one of measured investigation.
Not at all. It was a rush to judgment.
They immediately declared the death as suicide, citing those debunked claims of stress and debt, sometimes within hours of the discovery.
The procedural irregularity sets off every single alarm bell. They issued the verdict suicide by drowning before a full, conclusive autopsy had even returned its findings.
This predetermined narrative was designed solely to close the case administratively and shut down any external scrutiny.
But the science of the body betrayed their story.
We have to start with the definitive scientific evidence for drowning. The plankton anomaly, the diatom test, we need to go into depth on this.
Okay, so this test is definitive because of the mechanics of death. When a person is alive and they drown, they struggle, they gasp, They force the water, which is rich in microscopic organisms called diatoms plankton, into their lungs.
Okay.
This still beating heart then pumps these microscopic organisms through the bloodstream, where they get filtered and deposited into distant internal organs.
The liver, the kidneys.
The liver, the kidneys, and even the bone marrow.
So if Lee had genuinely drowned in that reservoir, his organs should have been saturated with diatoms that are specific to that body of water.
Precisely. But the National Forensic Service report found two critical contradictions. First, the overall plankton levels in his organs were negligible.
Negligible. So minimal, if any, circulation of water while he was alive.
Right. And second, the few diatoms that were detected did not match the specific diatom profile of the reservoir where the body was found.
So just to be crystal clear for everyone, the body contained evidence of water, but not this specific reservoir's water.
Exactly. He was dead, or very near death, when he was dumped.
That's the conclusion. This supports the hypothesis of post-mortem submersion. He was killed elsewhere and then placed in the reservoir to simulate a suicide.
Or he suffered what's called a dry drowning, where laryngospasm prevents water from entering the lungs. But the other evidence points more strongly toward active homicide.
And that evidence is the mark on his neck.
Yes. The initial autopsy, which was conducted under the supervision of the 𝐏𝐻𝐃 police, was very quick to dismiss these marks.
But the re-examination, which was demanded by the family,
and later supported by independent commissions, was conclusive. We have to contrast the marks. A typical suicide by hanging produces an inverted V-shaped mark, rising toward the knot.
Right.
Homicidal strangulation, however, typically leaves a horizontal, continuous compression mark.
And Detective Lee's neck showed definitive horizontal compression marks.
Consistent with a soft ligature, a cloth, a scarf, maybe a padded garrote.
This horizontal line is a signature of homicide, not suicide or accidental drowning.
And the presence of these marks, suggesting significant pressure, coupled with the lack of water circulation in the diatom test. It basically rules out genuine drowning as the primary cause of death. Strangulation was almost certainly the mechanism of death, and the body was subsequently disposed of.
Then there's the issue of the scene itself, the staging of the vehicle. His car was found near the reservoir, but it looked, as you put it, too theatrical.
It was messy, but with these deliberate props, his police ID, his wallet, his handcuffs, all laid out neatly on the passenger seat.
That reads like a civilian's idea of what a symbolic police suicide should look like.
It screams of a third party trying to reinforce a narrative for what they know will be compliant investigators. A truly despairing person rarely performs a detailed, symbolic arrangement of their professional credentials before ending their life.
And the single most damning piece of physical evidence that points to third-party intervention. The missing memory card from the dash cam, the black box.
Exactly. In 2010, these dash cams recorded on a continuous loop onto an SD card. A suicidal person has no rational motive to remove and dispose of that card.
So the deduction is unavoidable.
A third party removed the card to sanitize the record. They had to eliminate any footage that showed who Lee met, who was driving the car in those final minutes, or even the faces of the people staging the scene.
And the police search for this crucial piece of digital evidence was
perfunctory. It yielded nothing. And when you aggregate this whole forensic inventory, the scientifically contradictory diatom test, the homicidal ligature marks, the staged car, the missing black box, the technical failure on the phone data, it moves beyond simple negligence.
It becomes a statistical impossibility.
It does. A single error is a lapse. But a chain of 10 concurrent, systematic investigative failures, all of which just happen to favor the specific narrative of suicide. That's a coordinated conspiracy. It's designed to neutralize a homicide investigation from the inside out.
This forensic evidence is the clearest proof that the official ruling was calculated institutional self-preservation.
So we have scientific evidence of a homicide, a threatened whistleblower, and immediate police denial. This required strategic planning by the corrupt elements inside the department.
And the very first mechanism they used was establishing a profound conflict of interest.
The 𝐏𝐻𝐃 police station, the exact institution that Detective Lee was actively investigating for systemic bribery, took immediate and exclusive charge of the investigation into his death.
Which violates every standard operating procedure regarding internal conflicts. Who should have taken over?
An independent provincial or national agency, precisely to avoid any appearance of bias.
But instead, the Fox was put in charge of investigating the damage done to the henhouse.
They controlled the crime scene, the evidence, and the narrative flow from minute one.
And their first operational tactic was rapid-fire character assassination.
They needed to manufacture a plausible, emotionally palatable motive for the public, so they immediately leaked specific false information to the local press.
The narrative was consistent. Detective Lee was suffering from significant debt and severe depression due to work stress.
These were specific, targeted lies. They were later proven false by his family and subsequent commission investigations. Lee was financially stable, he was dedicated, and he had no history of mental illness.
So this tactic served a dual, sinister purpose.
Yes. First, it provided the media with a ready-made, easy-to-digest motive for suicide. Second, and equally important, it successfully isolated the victim.
It creates a psychological firewall, doesn't it? Who cares if a supposedly debt-ridden, depressed officer commits suicide? It prevents the public from seeing him as a whistleblower and a martyr.
That is the ultimate smear campaign. You neutralize the victim's credibility to protect the perpetrator's institution. And the suicide ruling itself was the strategic climax. It wasn't an error of judgment. It was a survival strategy for the entire network.
Because ruling it a homicide would have triggered a special prosecutor, right?
Absolutely. A ruling of homicide would have compelled an external, high-level investigation. It would have opened up the Room Salon connection, the bribery ledger, and the implicated officials to public scrutiny and judicial review.
But suicide allowed the case to be closed administratively, filed away quietly.
Safeguarding the careers and the freedom of everyone involved in that cartel structure.
And just like with the missing phone data, the obstruction of justice continued relentlessly when the family and independent advocates started asking for crucial CCTV footage.
Of course. The police claimed that cameras along the known route to the reservoir were either conveniently non-functional or that the footage had been accidentally overwritten during routine maintenance.
We see this pattern repeated again and again.
When digital evidence threatens the structure, a technical failure or systemic data loss is immediately cited. They learned in 2010 how effective this lie was in neutralizing external scrutiny of digital records.
Let's just dedicate a moment to the inventory of the cover-up based on the later review. This confirms the coordination.
The subsequent reviews highlighted what they termed the statistical improbability of all these concurrent errors.
Okay, let's list them.
We're talking about 1. Failure to secure the crime scene properly. 2. Declaration of suicide before the autopsy was complete. 3. Dissemination of false debt and depression rumors.
4. The claimed loss of cell phone tracking data.
5. Ignoring the forensic significance of the horizontal ligature mark. 6. Failure to confirm the diatoms matched the reservoir water.
7. Ignoring the administrative behavior, like the insurance call.
8. The claimed non-functionality or deletion of crucial CCTV footage. 9. Failure to conduct a diligent search for the missing dashcam card. And 10. Failure to analyze his stomach contents, which could have definitively nailed the time of death.
That is a systemic failure, so comprehensive, it can only be viewed as a coordinated, intentional conspiracy to dismantle a homicide investigation from the inside out.
It is a blueprint. They showed the subsequent generation of corrupt officers exactly how far they could go up to, and including the physical elimination of an internal threat, and that the institution, the hierarchy, would ultimately ensure their collective safety.
And here is where the dark lineage becomes crystal clear. The fact that the 𝐏𝐎𝐃 cover-up was completely successful, that no one was charged or held accountable for murder, that established a critical, empowering precedent for the future.
That success taught the most cynical members of the police force that internal affairs was a joke, that external oversight was manageable, and that their primary loyalty should be to the criminal enterprise, not to the law.
This lack of consequence bred the sheer operational audacity that defined the massive Gangnam cartels of 2019.
It did. And we have a structural comparison that shows the refinement of this corruption model. The core mechanics stayed the same, but the power level and sophistication just exploded.
So we can trace the evolution through an analysis of the two cases.
Right. In 2010, the police liaison was local intelligence division officers facilitating the cover-up in Yeosu. By 2019, that role had been nationalized, embodied by Senior Superintendent Yoon Jin.
Superintendent Yoon, who was referred to in the K-pop chat room simply as the police chief who has our backs. What was his actual capacity?
Yoon was a senior superintendent, and he often held positions close to the National Police Agency headquarters and the presidential complex, the Blue House.
So he was high up.
Very. His proximity gave him the ability to access high-level intelligence and, crucially, to preemptively quash investigations originating from the highest levels of law enforcement. He wasn't local muscle. He was high-level political defense.
And he was empowered by the knowledge that the system had already proven it would protect him.
The bribery method also modernized. The analog cash envelopes were replaced by more subtle, integrated forms of compensation,
The new currency was shares and investment equity in the lucrative club businesses.
which ensured the officers had a vested financial interest in the cartel's survival. They were paid not just to look away, but to actively participate in management decisions and crisis response. The scale was national, the method was financially integrated.
This shows the rot just ascending through the ranks. The cartel felt absolutely invincible because the lessons of 𝐏𝐎𝐃 confirmed their impunity.
They had internalized the ultimate lesson. When an internal threat like Detective Lee arises, the police hierarchy will risk systemic credibility to protect the network. Yoon's ability to operate at such a high level while managing syndicate troubles is the direct result of that unchallenged success in 2010.
And the treatment of whistleblowers, while it differed in outcome, it shares the same core intent. Let's compare the response to Detective Lee in 2010 to Kim Sang-kyo in 2019.
Kim Sang-kyo, the man whose assault outside the Burning Sun Club started the entire global scandal. The police reflex was identical in both cases. They protected the source of the bribes, the room salon or the nightclub, and they viewed the investigator or the complainant as the disruptive nuisance that had to be neutralized.
So in 2010, they saw a pathway for a quiet physical elimination because Lee was isolated.
But in 2019, Kim Sang-kyo, he had his assault filmed and posted on social media. He had a global audience watching. A quiet suicide was just impossible.
So the methodology of elimination had to evolve.
It evolved from physical murder to legal and social elimination. They weaponized the legal system against Kim Sang-kyo defamation suits, countercharges, relentless legal harassment designed to bankrupt and discredit him.
They proved that if they couldn't physically silence you, they would legally and socially erase you.
The fundamental objective, protect the cartel, punish the threat, remained ruthlessly consistent.
To truly understand why officers would actively conspire and cover up the murder of a colleague, we have to look beyond just simple greed. We need to analyze the cultural mechanism that binds them.
The concept of Uri. Uri is complex. It means righteousness or unwavering loyalty to one's group or obligations. In a healthy context, it's a positive cultural driver.
But within the deeply hierarchical, masculine, and insular structure of the police force, this concept becomes pathologically corrupted.
It demands absolute, unquestioning loyalty to the internal brotherhood over the external mandate of the law or justice.
So if the institution itself is corrupt, Weary demands loyalty to the corruption.
Exactly. The system flips the morality. And participation in the room salon culture, the drinking, the mandatory socializing, accepting the sexual services and the bribes, that acts as a perverse rite of initiation that seals the pact.
It creates a bond of complicity and shared guilt that is almost impossible to break.
It is. Once you've accepted the bribe or participated in the vice, you're in the club, and the collective risk is shared.
This shared guilt strengthens the Weary bond immensely. Betraying the collective becomes not just a legal risk, but a moral and social failure.
And this is how the blue wall of silence is built. It's not just for money. It's a perceived moral defense of the group identity.
Detective Lee Young-jun violated this pact on multiple fronts. He was an outsider who refused to integrate. And worse, he actively investigated the ring.
To the officers involved in the cartel, Lee was fundamentally not one of them. He wasn't just a snitch in the criminal sense. He was a traitor to the brotherhood.
He threatened their financial stability, their careers, their social standing.
Everything they defined by their loyalty to one another.
This warped morality is crucial to understanding the callousness of the cover-up. The perpetrators didn't see themselves as covering up a murder.
No, they saw themselves as defending the family from an existential threat posed by a rogue agent.
And this sociological dynamic is why reform is so difficult. The primary barrier isn't just money changing hands.
It's the deeply ingrained, culturally justified code of silence that prioritizes the internal group's survival above all else. Unless that corrupted Weary is decoupled from police identity, external oversight will always struggle to get through.
The public recognition that 𝐏𝐿SU was the necessary precursor to Burning Sun was immediate and powerful when the 2019 scandal broke. The ghost of Detective Lee was immediately invoked, driving a massive public petition.
Over 200,000 citizens signed a petition to the Blue House demanding a full, conclusive review of Detective Lee's death.
The public understood that prosecuting the symptoms, which was Burning Sun, wouldn't matter if the underlying disease, 𝐏𝐿SU, was left untreated.
And this public demand led to a review by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the KNPA, the Korean National Police Agency itself. But the review was structurally hampered by the very success of the original cover-up.
They faced insurmountable obstacles rooted in time.
First, the most immediate legal challenge was the statute of limitations. While murder itself might not expire, many of the associated crimes, bribery, destruction of evidence, abuse of power, had already run out.
Meaning many potential perpetrators were legally immune from prosecution on those specific charges.
Right. And then what about the physical evidence?
The forensic section made it clear the initial evidence was strong.
But the second hurdle was the severe degradation of that evidence. After 9 years, the original chemical samples, the initial tissue cultures, the potential trace evidence, all were either destroyed, improperly stored, or had chemically degraded to the point of being forensically unusable.
And the crucial CCTV footage and the missing black box were long gone.
And the third, and perhaps the most complex barrier, was the organized silence of the witnesses, the omerta.
The code of silence.
The officers involved had either retired, often with full pensions, or, in the case of those who had covered it up, had been promoted to higher positions of authority. The code held firm.
So human memory required to correct the conspiracy was either refusing to talk or had been deliberately erased through time and self-interest.
Yes.
So after all the pressure, the public outcry, the clear forensic contradictions, what was the bureaucratic compromise reached by the Review Commission?
It was a classic administrative maneuver. The review concluded that the initial investigation was gravely flawed and that suicide could not be conclusively proven.
Which provided crucial, necessary vindication for Detective Lee's family. It cleared his name from the debt and depression smears.
It did. But it explicitly stopped short of ruling the death a homicide.
So they admitted the police investigation was deeply corrupted, but they offered zero accountability for the actual perpetrators of the murder and the cover-up.
Precisely. It was a finding designed to soothe public anger while maintaining the technical closure of the case, ensuring no special prosecutor was automatically triggered, and thus guaranteeing that the individuals who benefited from the cover-up would face no charges.
Justice was delayed for a decade.
And ultimately, justice was institutionally denied.
We've traced a chilling and deeply regrettable lineage today. The death of Detective Lee Eun-jin in 2010 is not a closed case. It's the active, festering wound of the present.
It is. The sophisticated, nationally integrated infrastructure of the Burning Sun cartel proves, without a doubt, that the Yeosu blueprint for impunity remains intact and operational.
The lesson learned in 2010 was devastating.
It was. Institutional corruption can successfully use the state's own resources to eliminate an internal threat and ensure the hierarchy remains untouched. The corruption did not need to reinvent itself. It simply needed to scale up its audacity and its technology.
True reform, then, must begin not just with prosecuting the K-pop stars and the high-ranking officers involved in Gangnam, but with a full, genuine reckoning with the Yeosu case. The foundation of impunity has to be dismantled.
And this requires the establishment of an independent, powerful investigative body, shielded from the police hierarchy, with the authority and resources to finally pierce that decades-old blue wall of silence.
The failure to prosecute Lee's murderers created a moral hazard of catastrophic proportions.
It taught an entire generation of police officers that they could operate as a private cartel, protected by their state badges, with zero personal risk of consequence.
And that moral decay is the lingering shadow hanging over the Korean justice system. Until the truth of what happened at that reservoir is fully exposed and prosecuted, until the systemic protection of corruption ends, the silent accuser, the ghost of Detective Lee, will remain.
The system must answer for his death before it can ever truly claim to be reformed. The shadow of Burning Sun will continue to loom, and the next scandal is not a matter of if, but when, as long as the foundation of impunity laid down in Yeosu remains unchallenged.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.